I'm Kelly and welcome to Kapowski Reads, and this is my April wrap up. It's probably going to be a little bit of a shorter video than usual because my April reading was a lot less than usual. I actually went back and checked against previous months, and April 2023 is the lowest reading month that I have had since February 2020. And that was a busy month as well, because I remember I changed job, I was also ill, and then, the whole pandemic of the next month happened. So it's been a really long time since I have finished the month on fewer than 10 books, which I know is still a lot, but I usually read between like 12 and 20 on an exceptional month. So it felt a bit lower, but that's fine. I ended up reading 9 books, which worked out as a total of 2,726 pages, which is more than half of my normal page count, but still feels a lot less than normal because it is, that's why. My themes actually were a little bit different to the norm because there were no green. There was no green on my pie chart. There's usually green, but none in April, and I have forgotten what green means. Is that adventurous? I think it's adventurous. And I suppose none of my books in April felt adventurous. But my main themes of the month were mysterious, emotional, dark, and reflective. And well, that doesn't sound like I had a good month. That just sounds so depressing and sad. Even though I don't feel like my books were depressing and sad. I suppose actually some of the books I read were quite dark and somewhat depressing, really. This month was also, not only did I read fewer books to usual, but I also read more non-fiction. I started reading non-fiction last month after a huge sort of hiatus from reading it. I just hadn't felt drawn to reading non-fiction until last month, and this month again I read 3 non-fiction books. And I really like that I am reading more non-fiction, especially seeing as I've got a huge pile of non-fiction books I want to read. So that's quite nice to see. My genres for this month are also a little bit different to usual, with memoirs being right up at the top, with literary, and I never really know what is meant by literary, because to me that's just fiction. Is it not? Am I being stupid that I don't know what is meant by literary? Is that just a coverall for fiction? So memoir right up at the top because I read 3 memoirs. And then for second place there's a 4-way tie with classics, LGBTQIA+, thriller and mystery. Usual contenders for my most read genres. In a little bit of a change, there is no fantasy on my April genres, and that's maybe why I feel like I've not had the best reading month for April, because normally I read some fantasy. I tend to read quite a lot of fantasy, and that's like my happy place. And I didn't read any fantasy in April, and I ended up with an average rating of 3.17 stars, which again feels low, but it could have been lower because I actually had 2 DNFs. And I'm really proud of myself for DNFing those books, because I just felt almost instantly that I wasn't gonna enjoy them. And I'm really proud of myself for sort of acknowledging that and not continuing with them, because that's something I've been trying to work on so hard, because I am a completionist and I find it really difficult to stop reading a book. If I've started it, I kind of feel like, in mastermind, I've started, so I'll finish. But that's a really ridiculous way to view reading, because reading should be fun. And if the book isn't fun, why am I continuing with it? It's something I'm working on. It's something I feel I'm getting better at, but I feel so guilty DNFing a book. But it's not like I'm going up to the author and saying, I hate your work. But that's how it feels. So these are the physical books that I read in April. I did have a few ebooks as well and an audiobook, but this is my physical pile. And I have talked about my favourites of this pile already in previous videos this month. So I will be super quick just saying what my favourites were. There was also one book that I enjoyed that I haven't mentioned. So gonna mention that too. Let's start with the books I've already nattered on about though. So these were my favourite physical books that I read in April. They were The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. I keep saying Bratz, and I think it's because I recently watched a video of somebody talking about the Bratz film, which I haven't thought about for about 15 years. And since then, the song, actually 2 songs from that film, have been going around my head in a sort of loop, and that's why I keep saying Bratz, but it is Bart's. And this book is about a writing retreat in a solitary location, and then murder ensues. But it's so much more than that. It is a psychological thriller where there are so many unlikable characters, but they feel well-rounded, and I sort of wanted to know more about the characters. I wanted to know what made them tick. I wanted to know their motivation for what was going on. I was kept on the edge of my seat with this book. I could not guess what was coming until literally pages before the reveals. I really enjoyed this. It kept me guessing, and it was a really wonderful closed door mystery thriller with some elements of, ooh, is it a ghost story? It was enjoyed. Another sort of murdery book I enjoyed was The Last Final Girl by Stephen Graham Jones. This was a very strangely formatted book in that it wasn't quite a novel and it wasn't quite a script. It is an homage to the final girl trope. It is basically a slasher film in a book. And as a lover of older horror films, I don't like new horror films. They're too scary. I like the sort of predictable slasher films where you know what's coming. None of those jump scares for me. I get scared. So I really enjoyed this. I, again, was kept guessing. I liked the twists where the book did not go down the predictable route, but I feel it was a really good homage to a film genre that I assume the author really enjoy. I would have loved for this book to have included a little bit of just letting me know where I was, because it felt like a transcript for a film, I suppose. But there were no set directions in there, so there was a few moments here and there where I got a bit disoriented about where I was, but I mean, I can deal with that. I easily managed to get my bearings, but I think that's the only thing that I felt was missing. This was my first introduction to this author and Julia Bartz as well, so I'm very excited to see what these authors do next. And I know Stephen Graham Jones has got a whole lot of books that have been highly recommended to me, so I will be checking those out. Oh, Caledonia by Elspeth Barker. This is a Scottish modern classic about a young woman who dies right at the beginning of the book, and then we go back to find out what happened, what led to her death. And it's one of those sort of almost coming of age novels where everything's a little bit bleak, but the character's so lovable and she's so kind of quirky, and I just warmed to her, and I really grew to love this character, which was really hard knowing that things weren't going to end well for her, because the book starts with her falling down a flight of stairs and we know that she's been murdered. I really enjoyed trying to plot together who did it, because it was really hard trying to work out who did it, because I couldn't really figure out why anybody would. So I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the sort of relationship she had with her cousin, and how she was kind of left out a little bit, and she just wanted to spend her time outdoors with the animals, away from the people. I really liked her. She was such an adorable character. It did make me really sad that there weren't more stories for her, because she was no more. I also loved The Tick and the Talk of the Crocodile Clock by Kenny Boyle. This was a really heartwarming story about a young woman called Wendy learning to kind of find herself, and she found herself through a friendship with Kat, who kind of brought her out of her shell, and she kind of learned to live and make choices for herself. I loved that she stopped letting people walk all over her, and I really enjoyed the moments where she stood up for herself. I wanted to slow clap for her every time she did that. In a similar vein to O Caledonia, this book started with Wendy on the run from the law after having stolen a painting from a gallery, and then it sort of fast forwards to and then it sort of rewinds to the "I bet you're wondering how I ended up here" moment. And I really enjoyed, again, trying to work out what led this previously shy and retiring, timid woman to stealing a painting and running. I really enjoyed it. She was such a lovable character. I really enjoyed her, and I just wanted good things for her. I also loved her granny and her relationship with her grandmother, and I just loved seeing her come into her own. I thought this was a heartwarming book that made me ugly cry. And the final book that I really enjoyed this month was a non-fiction, Paris the Memoir by Paris Hilton. I didn't know what to expect going into this book because I hadn't watched the documentary, because I just didn't feel I had the emotional capability to, I just didn't feel like I had the capacity to watch a documentary. So I went into this book not knowing all of the horrific experiences that she had had with regards to the schools that she was sent away to as a teenager. And I found this book to be utterly heartbreaking to read, and I actually took a really long time to read this. I think it took me just over two or 3 weeks to read it, because I had to keep stopping because it was just it was so emotional, and it felt like a very raw book, and I really appreciate the sort of vulnerability that was shown in this memoir. There were points where I felt like it was 2 books spliced together, if that makes sense. There were parts that were these horrific experiences and abuse that she had gone through, and then there would be moments of just describing an outfit, very much reminding me of My Immortal by Raven, can't remember her name, but it's fan fiction, and it's my favorite fan fiction to go back and read when I'm feeling sad. I highly recommend it, as read by Ashley Story. She does voices and I howl with laughter, but that's not relevant to this. But yeah, it just felt a little like perhaps it was at one point going to be a memoir that was light, fluffy. Here's some sort of stories about celebrity parties and stuff. And then it was changed into, here are some horrible experiences that I'm going to talk about, and then they sort of merged the two together. So there were some times where it sort of felt a bit jumpy and like I was reading 2 books at once, but I still really enjoyed it. I mean, I don't know if I enjoyed it or if I just appreciated it. As a memoir, it was very harrowing, but I'm so glad I read it, and I had heard really good things about the memoir, so I'm going to second them and say yes, it was a really tough book, but I think it was a really important book. So I'm glad I read it. That is I almost forgot. My favourite book. My book recommendation of the month that nobody asks me for, but I'm giving it anyway. My favourite book of April was The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. I absolutely love this book. I could not fault it. It gave me absolutely everything that I wanted, even things I didn't know that I wanted. But it gave me everything I wanted and everything I needed at the time. I read this book in under 24 hours in a month that has been it felt like an absolute slump. So this book, highly recommend. It is one of my favourites so far of the year. I would love to know what your favourite book was of this month. Let me know in the comments, and hopefully May will be a better reading month all round. That's a good aim to have. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!